Good afternoon, Summit. Y'all awake? All right. Who wants to live to be 120? All right, that's a good number. Not all of you, maybe 10%. What about the rest of you? Scared of dying soon or no? Nobody thinks about living to be 120 because if you think about living to be 120, it's kind of a scary thought because everything we see around us is abnormal aging. But what if I could tell you that you could reach 120, take a beautiful hike in the mountains with your beloved, swim in a cool mountain lake, make a delicious dinner, have a bottle of wine, make love, and just gently drift off into the night? Does that sound good? Well, my friends, that is possible, and that's what I'm going to share with you today, because everything we've thought about aging is wrong, and we have to completely reimagine everything we thought about human biology, because the science is revolutionarily changing our concepts of health and disease. The paradigm that we're in now is akin to the earth is flat or that the sun revolves around the earth. But we now know that the chair you're sitting on is mostly empty space, that time is not linear, and most of us think the earth is not flat. Not all. And that is the type of paradigm shift that's happening right now in medicine. What if I told you that diseases don't really exist? They're just constructs. They're just things that we have created in our minds to describe phenomena, but it's the wrong description of the reality, just like thinking the earth is flat or the sun revolves around the earth. So, who here thinks that aging is a disease? A couple of you. Most of what we see as aging today is abnormal aging. It leads to frailty, decrepitude, disease, disability, dysfunction. Who wants that? Nobody. But that's not now what's possible. So the concept that aging is a disease is now emerging among the leading researchers in longevity. And there's literally billions of dollars flowing into the research around longevity science, not from the government. The NIH budget for aging is minuscule. It's a couple of billion, but most of that's on the diseases of aging, like Alzheimer's, heart disease, cancer. You know, the budget for cancer is $6 billion. The budget for aging mechanisms is about a couple $100 million. But there's literally billions of dollars flowing into this from basically billionaires who don't want to die. So, which is okay, but we'll get there. Now, I'm going to be 63 next week. And I checked my biological age just recently, and I'm 43. I'm going for 25. Now, what is this measuring? It's measuring something called your biological clock, and there's many ways we're learning how to do this, but this is a very new type of research allowing us to look at our epigenome. Who here knows what the epigenome is? Great, you guys are all smart. Someone walked up to me and said, everybody here is so hot and so smart and so nice. I'm like, yeah, it's true. It's true. But the beautiful thing is now we have a metric to look at the interventions that we can do and their impact on our biological age. And we also can measure our immune age and many other things we're going to talk about. So how do we get there? Should we all become vegans like the Seventh-day Adventists from Loma Linda who live in the blue zone there? Or should we be more like the Plains Native Americans, Lakota, who basically lived mostly on bison and had the longest lived population at the turn of the 1900s with many, many centenarians? What is the limit of aging? Is it like the bowhead whale that lives maybe a couple hundred years? They found a harpoon, an old bowhead that was from a couple hundred years ago. Or the Greenland shark lives 400 years. So we have to kind of reimagine what the limits of aging are. Some are even suggesting we can outlive death. We can reach what we call longevity escape velocity, which is the advances in science are going to be happening so fast that we're going to keep extending our life if we can stay alive long enough. So you need about another 10 or 15 years to stay alive, guys, and then we might get there. So we have to rethink medicine. We have to rethink health. We have to rethink disease. And we have to get out of this old model, which is based on describing symptoms and where those symptoms are. It's medicine by symptom and geography, not by mechanism and cause. And now we're beginning to understand and pulled back the veil on the mechanism. Einstein said, I don't want to know the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know the thoughts of God. The rest are details. Finally, we're able to start to think about nature of nature, the thoughts of God. Those are being revealed in the emerging science of longevity. And the medicine we have is essentially whack-a-mole medicine. You have chest pain, you go to the chest doctor. You have head pain, you go to the head doctor. You have a joint pain, you go to the joint doctor. You have a stomach pain, you go to the stomach doctor. I just had a friend come up to me when I was walking around and said, thank you for referring to me to this other doctor, this other functional medicine doctor, who cured his son of anxiety and depression and debilitating psychiatric symptoms by fixing his microbiome. That's where we're at. And that doesn't get explained with our current model of thinking. When you go to the rheumatologist and you have joint pain, they don't say, well, let me look at your poop. But they should. Right? So most of the aging research is about the disease of aging, dementia, heart disease, cancer, diabetes. And we're in a frightening moment because even as we're beginning to peel back the nature of human biology, understand the laws of biology, we're seeing an explosion of chronic illness. 6 out of 10 Americans have a chronic disease. 4 out of 10 have 2 or more. The cost is, these slides I keep having to change. This slide says 3.5 trillion, now it's 4.1 trillion. And depending on how you define chronic disease, it's even more. We see 12% of Americans a number of years ago were metabolically unhealthy. That means they have high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol. And a study came out recently this year showed that just 6.8% of Americans are metabolically healthy, meaning they have normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol, normal blood sugar, haven't had a heart attack or stroke, and are not overweight. So like most of you, we're in the minority here. It's a good minority. So we are in this moment where we can't continue in this way. We're spending more and more and getting less and less and keeping the same thing and having worse outcomes. And the United States is worse than ever. We're seeing a decline in life expectancy for the first time in history, while we're spending more and more than any other nation. We spend more than double any other nation, and where our health outcomes are worse and sometimes next to last in many health outcomes. So the question is, how do we not just treat disease, but how do we create health? That's what functional medicine is. It's the science of creating health. For the first time, we're understanding the laws of biology. The laws of physics are extraordinary. And just with a few natural laws, like you saw Bjarke's talk, with a few natural laws of physics, we can create all the things that we see around us, your phone and go to space, and just all the technologies we see come from a few basic natural laws that create a great number of phenomena. The same is true in biology. So the science of longevity is helping us to reveal what are those basic laws of biology, and how do we work with those fundamental mechanisms? How do we reimagine aging so that we don't see what we typically see now, which is that the last 20% of people's life, they're not healthy. You want your health span, which is how many years you're alive, to equal your lifespan, right? You want to maybe spend the last couple of days not well and then just go, or maybe not at all. So how do we reimagine aging? How do we rethink what's possible and kind of capture our imagination back around what's possible with human health and longevity? Now, right now, there's this convergence happening of multiple different things throughout science and technology that are allowing us to radically transform healthcare and medicine, and it's coming fast, except it's not coming to your doctor's office. It's coming on the periphery, on the margin of medicine. Just like Apple created a phone and, changed the music industry, it's not going to come from inside. And so what's happening is there's a phenomena where we've uncovered the Human Genome Project has discovered our genome. It's led to the understanding of the omics revolution, proteomics, transcriptomics, and the microbiome. All these things we're sort of unpacking and understanding what's going on, but it's huge amounts of data. And so there's huge big data analytics and quantum computing and artificial intelligence, all being now possible to filter all the huge gigabytes of data that are in each one of us. But what's needed is a framework to understand all that, which is systems biology. It's a framework of understanding how our biology is a network of networks. You're an ecosystem. And so to try to treat each part separately doesn't make any sense. I don't treat disease. I create health, and when I do that, disease goes away as a side effect. And then we have the quantified self movement. And many of you are wearing devices, and whether it's an Oura Ring or a Fitbit or your Apple Watch, that are tracking your biometrics. But soon we're going to be able to put it in an implantable thing, not just a continuous glucose monitor, but an implantable chip that might track thousands of your biomarkers in real time, putting it up in the cloud, combining with all the other data you have, and learning exactly what is going on in your physiology in a personalized way to help you guide moment-to-moment decisions about your health. So this is functional medicine. Who's heard about functional medicine? Amazing, amazing. Okay, well, I can retire now. I've been at this for 30 years, and I would ask that question even a few years ago, and I wouldn't get many hands. So functional medicine is the clinical model that helps us to apply systems biology and thinking. And Einstein said, it's a wonderful feeling to recognize the unity of complex phenomena that to direct observation appear to be quite separate things. And we're now finally coming to understand what scientists are calling the hallmarks of aging. These are the fundamental things that go wrong that underlie all disease. Now, some scientists say there's 9. I added one, the 10, which is the microbiome. But it's important to understand that these hallmarks are still, while they're upstream from the diseases, they're still not fully explaining the cause. What causes the hallmarks? What's the cause of the cause? So functional medicine is about understanding root causes. So the hallmarks are important to understand because we have to work with them. We have to look at them. We have to measure them. We have to be able to get the metrics to understand what we're doing and whether it's working to improve or not these hallmarks of aging. But the important thing is we have to get to the root cause, and we're going to talk about what those are. And functional medicine helps us figure that out. And we're going to get a little bit more into how do we address these things. But we see changes in our epigenome with aging. Who knows what our epigenome is? Basically, your genome is your genes. You've got 20,000 genes, let's say, about the same as an earthworm. But you have this thing called the epigenome, which means it sits above the genes. You can't change your genes unless through gene editing. But you can change the expression and function of your genes in real time at any age. So when I measured my biological age, I was measuring my epigenome. And I was measuring my biological clock by measuring the epigenetic marks on my gene. Basically, the bookmarks in my book of life, figuring out which ones are expressed, which are not, and how I can influence those by my lifestyle washing over my genes. You basically are at this moment the sum total of all your life, your experiences, every bite of food you took, every toxin you were exposed to, every thought you had, every relationship you were in. Everything that has happened throughout your life is what we call your exposome, what you're exposed to. And that's far more important than your genome because that washes over you all the time, and you have almost full control over that. That's what the exciting part is, because you can change your epigenome and reverse your biological clock through addressing how we address this. But there's more things that go wrong. We have problems with DNA damage. We get thousands of little hits, maybe hundreds of thousands every day, and we have a DNA repair system on board, thank God. We have abnormal proteins that form as we age and get disfigured and dysfunctional. And proteins are the communication messengers of your body. We also have the phenomena of our mitochondria, which are energy factories, and how those are not functioning as we age. We lose energy. What's the difference between a 2-year-old running around with energy that doesn't stop like an ever-ready bunny and somebody who's 90 years old who's kind of moving like this? It's their mitochondria. So the function of your mitochondria, the number of your mitochondria, the health of your mitochondria determines the quality of your health and aging. And those go bad as we get older and related to a lot of these things that we're talking about. We see zombie cells form, which are these cells that don't die but spew out inflammation throughout the body and make other cells zombie cells and create this phenomenon called inflammaging. Inflammaging is this phenomenon of inflammation that's underlying all these diseases. So obesity, heart disease, cancer, depression, dementia, all these things are diseases of inflammation. Psychiatric diseases, all of it are diseases of inflammation. And then our stem cells get pooped out. And then our microbiome degrades because of our diet and stress and various things. And our microbiome plays a big role in driving inflammation in our body. And then there's this bigger phenomenon, which I think is upstream to a lot of it, which is dysregulated nutrient sensing. It's a mouthful, but it basically means how what you eat affects these longevity switches in your body. Things like mTOR. Who's heard of mTOR? Okay, not too many. Okay, I'll explain what that is. AMPK and sirtuins and insulin signaling pathways. These are the 4 key longevity switches that are influenced by what we eat. And so how we eat, what we eat, when we eat, the quality of the food we eat, all determine whether these longevity switches are being activated to extend our life or to shorten our life. And that's something we have huge control over. So food is one of the biggest levers we have to regulate our biology. So in a nutshell, that is, and the telomeres. We have these telomeres, which are these little like things at the end of our genes, our chromosomes, that have to unwind in order for our cells to replicate, and they shorten as we get older. And the more short they are, the shorter your life. And we have huge ability to influence those. So we have the ability to influence all these hallmarks of aging by what we do. And these are underlying all these diseases of aging that we talked about. But there are causes of these. And functional medicine helps us figure this out. This is the map of functional medicine. This is what we look at when we see a patient. There's 155,000 diseases in the code book for medicine. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is how do I figure out each person's map? What are the predisposing factors? What are their genes? What are the things that have happened to them in their life, whether it's emotional, physical trauma, toxic exposure, infections? How do those predispose them to illness? And what are their fundamental lifestyle factors? Your diet, exercise, stress, sleep, relationships, community, connection, all these things are interacting with these basic biological networks. These 7 systems, these are networks of networks. And they're all interacting and all dynamic and all working in a web. And literally there's trillions of reactions every second in the body. And so this is the map I use to determine what's going on. So when there's too much of something or not enough of something, when there's too much of bad stuff and not enough good stuff, it creates imbalance in these systems. And the imbalances in these systems lead to the symptoms and diseases that we see. So my job as a functional medicine doctor is to create a map of this for every person and figure out what their unique symptoms are telling me about where there's dysfunction in these systems. And then all I do is get these systems in balance. I take away the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, and the body has this incredible innate intelligence, and it has its own built-in healing system that we just have to learn how to activate. And that, my friends, is what the rest of the talk is going to be about. So this is a pretty cool slide. This is an experiment that was done to show you the power of influencing your epigenome. It's been done by Randy Girdle, who's one of the leading scientists in the epigenetic field, and he basically took identical genetic mice, the agouti mice, which is the big fat mouse here with the, over here. And this mouse is bred to be obese, diabetic. And they gave these mice some vitamins, the mothers. They took 2 different groups, right? One group, they just give them the regular mouse chow. And the other group, they gave the mouse chow plus these special vitamins, B vitamins, B12, folate, B6, trimethylglycine, a few other things. Some soy, genistein, some phytochemicals. And then when the mother mouse gave birth, they found that the mice who had the vitamins, they weren't obese, and they were thin and healthy. That's the power of modulating the epigenome through these various compounds, which are available to all of us. And there's a lot of ways to do it, not just the B vitamins. It has to do with what we call DNA methylation. Methylation just means taking a carbon and 3 hydrogen in this group. It's like the currency of your body, and they move around a billion times a second in communication. They're like the currency of our body. Like we use money, this is how your body exchanges information. And it regulates your DNA, it regulates your mood, it regulates detoxification, pretty much everything. And when it's not working, you're in trouble. So the epigenetics that we now understand is controlled in large part, not only, but in large part by DNA methylation. So understanding what affects it, how to regulate it, what foods impact it, what nutrients impact it, what screws it up is really important. So we have to understand our chronological age, I'm 62, I'm going to be 63 next week, doesn't really matter. It's our biological age that matters. And I've seen people who were 40 who had a biological age of 70, and I've seen people who are 70 who have a biological age of 40. That's what's possible if we understand how to work with this. So how do we reverse our biological age clock? What do we have to do? Well, this is a patient I had at Cleveland Clinic. Her name was Janice. She had so many problems, right? She had heart disease, heart failure, angina, diabetes on insulin. She had high blood pressure. Her kidneys were failing. Her liver was failing. She had fatty liver. And she was on a pile of medications. Her copay was $20,000 a year. And she had this whole list of problems, which is why I call myself a holistic doctor, because I take care of people with a whole list of problems. And Janice was on her way out. She was headed for a heart transplant and a kidney transplant. And we use this powerful new drug that has the power to transform and improve the expression of tens of thousands of genes, to optimize tens of thousands of protein networks, to balance and optimize your hormone regulation, to improve your brain chemistry, to optimize your microbiome, and it works faster, better, and cheaper than any drug on the planet, and it's available to almost anybody. You know what it is? What you put at the end of your fork is more important than anything you'll find in a prescription bottle. Within 3 days of changing your diet, all right, we did it at Cleveland Clinic on our Function for Life program, and it's based on a anti-inflammatory, detoxifying, microbiome-supporting diet, which I basically use at my patients part of functional medicine. I call it the 10-day detox diet, but essentially it's basically whole foods, anti-inflammatory, lots of good fats, low glycemic, a lot of phytonutrients. Within 3 days, she was off insulin. Within 3 months, using food as medicine, we were able to transform all her diseases. And food is like code. You can rewrite your biological software by what you're eating. If you understood that with every bite of food you take, you're literally transforming everything in your body in real time, you would think twice about what you're eating. Nobody mentioned in particular here, but and this is what happened to Janice after a year. In 3 months, she reversed her heart failure, her diabetes, her kidneys normalized, her fatty liver normalized, her blood pressure normalized. She got off all her medication. Her copay, like I said, was $20,000. She saved huge amounts of money, and she got her life back, and she lost 116 pounds. But like I said, within 3 days, she was off her insulin. In 3 months, she was off everything, and then it took a bit to get the weight off. And you take type 2 diabetics who are 400 pounds, they get a gastric bypass, and within 2 weeks, their diabetes is gone, or even a week. They're still severely obese. What's the difference? It's what they're putting in their mouth. And somebody had the bright idea to do a study and say, well, let's compare bariatric surgery to just changing diet, which you'd eat as if you'd had a bariatric surgery, and there was no difference. Right? So when I think about how to treat patients, it really comes down to this really simple formula. Take out the bad stuff and put in the good stuff. We're either dying of too much or dying of too little. Right? We got to put in the things that our bodies need to thrive. We need to take out bad diet, manage our stress, and remove as much toxins from our diet and life as possible, address environmental allergens and food allergens and sensitivities, and deal with latent infections or our microbiome, which is a huge factor in aging. And we need to put in the things that make us thrive. We're biological organisms. It's not complicated. If you're a vet, you know way more about nutrition than any doctor does. So whole foods, the right nutrients, the right type of movement and exercise, stress reduction, sleep, community, meaning, purpose. Community is so important to our health. It's one of the key anchors of the blue zones where they live a long time. They have really rich community. So let's kind of get into it. What is causing the dysfunctions that we see in the hallmarks? What are those things that we need to deal with and get rid of, and how do we address those? Well, a lot of it's driven by inflammation that leads to these problems, and it's basically our diet. For every 10% of your diet that's ultra-processed food, which is about 60% to 67% of our diet, your risk of death goes up by 14%. So you do the math. It's a lot. The #1 killer in the world today is bad food and not enough good food. Kills 11 million people a year conservatively. I think it's a lot higher than that, more than smoking or anything else. It just dwarfs anything. Why did we see America, who's got the best healthcare system in the world, and it's 4% of the population, have 16% of the COVID cases and deaths? Nobody's talking about that. It's the food. It's sugar. I hate to say it, I love sugar like anybody else, but we are not meant to eat 22 teaspoons a day, which is about the average for the average American, and I know I'm not having that much, so you must be having a little more. And we used to have 22 teaspoons a year as hunter-gatherers. Maybe we find a berry patch. And this leads to this phenomena called diabesity, which is the spectrum of pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. This phenomena now affects 93.2% of Americans at some degree or another, depending on how you define it. And I have a more liberal definition. I'm like, what's the optimal human health? Not what's the normal range on a lab test, right? The normal range on a lab test keeps changing because we discover, oh, if your blood sugars used to be 140 was diabetes. Now it's 126, and used to be 115 was prediabetes. Now it's 100. But what if it's 85 to 100? Well, your risk of death goes up in a linear fashion from 85 to 100. So what's optimal? So what is optimal? And toxins are a huge factor too. We're exposed to 80,000 new toxins since the Industrial Revolution. Huge problem. Our microbiome has been so destroyed. If you look at indigenous cultures, their microbiome is very different. You know, I want to do fecal transplants and find indigenous cultures that Wade Davis was talking about and get poop pills for us all to take, because I think it would help us a lot. That's coming, promise. Mitochondria, I'm not kidding, by the way. Mitochondria is a huge topic, and a lot of the ways that the aging and longevity switches work and food works is through mitochondria. What do the mitochondria do? They take the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe, and they combust it like an engine in your mitochondria through a whole assembly line and produce energy. And the waste is carbon dioxide you breathe off and water you pee out, and there's some waste, free radicals, and our bodies manage that. We deal with oxidative stress, but if we don't deal with that right, our mitochondria degrade, they get old, they get pooped out, and we lose energy, and we age fast. And a lot of the disease of aging, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, a lot of these are mitochondrial problems. Also, our sedentary lifestyle. I mean, I love these conferences and sitting, but I went and played tennis for an hour, and I feel much better by not sitting on my butt all day. And we know that now the lack of exercise, which probably maybe 8% of Americans get enough exercise, is also contributing in a huge way. Loneliness and isolation and disconnection. Why are we all here? Because we see our friends and our community. It makes us feel good. This whole phenomenon of sociogenomics, which is the power of our social interactions and our social networks to create health and well-being. I took this model and I created a faith-based wellness program at the Saddleback Church in California with Rick Warren called the Daniel Plan, where we got 15,000 people to sign up in a week, and they lost 250,000 pounds in a year. We went on to write a book called The Daniel Plan, which sold 1 million copies and won the Christian Book of the Year award. Of course, I'm the only Jew to win that book award ever. Well, that was that one guy 2,000 years ago, but So we found that people in that church used the small groups that they had to help each other get healthy. There wasn't a doctor, a nutritionist, a health coach. They just helped each other and support each other to live better, healthier lives. So how do we reimagine aging? How do we address the hallmarks of aging? How do we optimize the matrix? How do we get to where we want to go? So we talked about the hallmarks. Now, there's different ways to get into this, and a lot of science is talking about how do we fix these problems? How do we optimize these systems? And they're developing drugs, and they're developing drugs for senolytic cells, for zombie cells, and they're trying to develop drugs to work on these various pathways that we're going to talk about in a minute, like mTOR, and they're looking at how do we affect telomeres by different compounds. And we may be using medication. I'm not against medication, but we have a lot of the tools already. And one of the things that we know is that calorie restriction is a powerful tool for extending life. It's the only thing that works in animal models over and over again to extend life by a third. So if you want to live to be, as a human, 120, that's the amount, right? If you're 80 is the average life expectancy, you extend it by a third, that's 120. So this is repeatable. Of course, nobody wants to be starving and eat a third less calories because you're going to be hangry all the time and not very much fun to be around, like me when I don't eat. And, and this is an experiment they did with these mice. These are not mice, these are monkeys. And they basically put the monkey on the left on a calorie-restricted diet and the other monkey not. And the other monkey aged very fast, and his biological was worse, his labs are worse, he got arthritis and decrepit, and his skin was bad, and his hair was falling out. And, it's not fun. And what does calorie restriction do? It gives our bodies a chance to repair itself through this process called autophagy. Who's heard of autophagy? Oh, God, you guys are good. Okay. So autophagy is key to healthy aging, which is basically the idea that we have our own repair and recycling system. When we're starving and don't get enough food, we still need proteins. We still need to do stuff with our bodies. So what are we going to do? We're going to harvest old cells and parts, and we're going to break them down and digest them, and we're going to get the amino acids and all the pieces, and we're going to stick them back together to make new proteins and new parts so we can live. That's what autophagy is. It's basically self-cannibalism in the service of repair and regeneration. Now, calorie restriction does a lot of other things too. It reduces inflammation, it reduces oxidative stress, it helps improve your stem cell function, it increases DNA repair. It's like this whole cascade of things start to go into play when you do calorie restriction. But you don't really want to do that all the time. There's ways to hack calorie restriction. We're going to talk about that. There's dietary ways, there's also supplement ways, there's nutrient ways, there's even medication. So this is kind of a more technical slide, but I want to talk about these 4 nutrient pathway switches quickly, which is mTOR, which means mammalian target of rapamycin, and we're going to get into what that is in a minute. But that's essentially a nutrient sensing pathway that senses protein and sugars. Now, if you're activating this pathway, and you want to build muscle, it's a good thing. You want protein to build muscle. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but muscle is the currency of aging. If you lose muscle, you age rapidly. Your muscle is the most important organ that's neglected in your body because it has to function well, and you need to make muscle. So you need to activate mTOR. But if you turn it on all the time, which we do, we just keep eating all the time, and eat late and eat early and don't take breaks, we basically are activating this pathway. When you do too much, it's like you get cancer and you get degeneration, all this other stuff. You just keep, it's like cooking all day in your kitchen, never cleaning it up. Now, mTOR silencing is a big thing in longevity research. A lot of longevity research, oh, how do we silence mTOR? We get rid of protein. Well, if you get rid of protein, or if you become a vegan, your muscles aren't going to be able to be built in the ways that you need to build them in order to maintain muscle mass as you age. And I wish I had an hour to talk about this one topic, because it's a big topic. But I wrote a book. It's called Young Forever. It's coming out in February. It's all in there. And so we want to activate mTOR in the right moments. It's like Goldilocks, but not all the time. And we want to inhibit mTOR in the right moments, particularly at night. So having a pathway to do that is really important. The other switch is AMPK, which is regulated by sugar and nutrient sensing, and sirtuins, which you might have heard about from resveratrol. You might have heard about metformin being used for longevity. That works on AMPK. You might have heard about resveratrol from grapes using for sirtuin activation, which is involved in DNA repair. It's activated by NAD. We'll talk about that. And insulin signaling. That's one of the worst things. If you keep your sugar high, you're basically accelerating aging throughout your life. So you end up looking at your body as you age, and you're 30 years old. You have a certain amount of muscle, and you can be the same weight at 30 and 80. And have a totally different body composition. Your body could be half fat even though you look the same weight. So you don't want your muscle to become like ribeye. You want it like filet mignon. And it's important. This is Emma Morano, who lived to be 117 years old. She was dwindling in her 90s, and her doctor said she should eat 150 grams of raw meat a day. And she did. And she lived to 117 years old. So there's many ways to hack this, but you've heard of intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating. There's all these ways to do it. But basically, if you don't eat for 12 hours overnight, that's a good start. If you want to extend it to 14 hours, okay. 16 hours may be better. And everybody's a little different, and different people may be able to tolerate this better. But the idea is nobody should be having any food within a 12-hour period every single day. Now, you can do extended fast for a day a week. You could do, every quarter, a 5-day fast. There's all kinds of ways to do this. There's the fasting mimicking diets. There's ketogenic diets, which do the same thing, because when you're on a ketogenic diet, your body is doing exactly the same thing as if you hadn't been eating, because it thinks you're starving, which is not a bad thing. And ketogenic diets have been shown to reverse cancer and dementia and autism. And it's really quite an interesting phenomenon of how do we activate these healing mechanisms. So the question is, what the heck should I eat? What should I have for lunch? I wish I could, again, talk to you about this. I've written more books than I care to say about this topic. Food, what the heck should I eat? Food, actually, cookbook. My new book, Young Forever. I'll talk a lot about food and longevity, the Pegan diet. But basically, it's very simple. You want to eat a lot of this. As many colorful variety of plant foods as you can. So your diet should be plant-rich. That's different than plant-based. Plant-rich means, 70, 80% of your plate should be colorful fruits and vegetables. And then the rest is fat and protein. And the question is how much protein you need. It changes as you age, but as you age, you need more. And the minimum amount that people are saying is 8.8 grams per kilo. That's the minimum amount to not get a deficiency disease. How much vitamin C do you not get scurvy? 60 milligrams. Not much. How much vitamin D do you need to not get rickets? 30 units. How much you need to prevent osteoporosis and prevent cancer and help with all the other things in the immune system? Probably more than 5,000 units. So it's really about the amount. High quality protein, good fats, nuts and seeds, all that stuff is really important. We also need adequate sleep. Really important, underestimated. Matthew Walker's got a great book on this. We need to learn how to reset our nervous systems, especially in this current culture, which is so activating. We need to learn how to activate our relaxation response. And it's an active process. It's not a passive process. You have to work to relax in a way, which means meditation, yoga, breath work, whatever turns you on. There's a million ways to do it. We need community. That's why we're all here, right? We're all here because we feel good when we're in relationship, right? Stick a human in the middle of the forest or in the middle of the jungle or in the middle of the desert, and they're not going to survive by themselves. So we are bred to be in community. E.O. Wilson wrote a book called The Social Conquest of the Earth, which is all about that. Also, optimism and meaning and purpose enhance our lives. Literally, if you look at the data on meaning and purpose, you actually extend your life by 7 years if you have meaning and purpose in your life. Also, altruism is pretty awesome because the same thing that happens when you have cocaine or alcohol or nicotine, you activate this area of your brain called the nucleus accumbens. It's stimulated by dopamine. The same thing happens when you are of service. Neem Karoli Baba basically had it right. Love everybody, serve everybody, feed everybody. So that's my job. So let's talk about how we support healthy aging. What do we have to do to actually help support healthy aging? Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty. Hormesis. Who's heard of hormesis? Great. You guys are good guys. Hormesis essentially is the idea of it's a stress that doesn't kill you but makes you stronger. So our bodies are not meant to live in a thermoregulated 68-degree temperature and be in these controlled environments 24/7. We're meant to be stressed, and stress activates our longevity pathways. So there's hormesis foods. Foods that are stressed work to help heal our bodies. That's why wild foods are better than regenerative foods, are better than organic foods, are better than commercial foods, because they contain higher levels of phytochemicals. The greatest example of this is the Himalayan tartary buckwheat, which is grown in the Himalayas in the worst conditions and has 132 phytochemicals, some never found in any other place in the world, that regulate your immune system, that activate these longevity switches, that kill zombie cells, and you can make pancakes out of them. And there's also, you can take it as supplements. So these are powerful compounds that we know are in foods, and you just want to eat a lot of this stuff. You can activate these pathways by what we talked about: time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting, longer fasts, fasting mimicking diets, ketogenic diets, all do the same thing. Exercise, really important. Moving your body. And there's two kinds of exercise. One is aerobic, and that's to increase something called your VO2 max, which is the maximum ability to use oxygen. And that's a measure of your mitochondrial function. So the higher your VO2 max, the fitter you are, the longer you live. And the way to do that is interval training. Like I was running around a tennis court and I couldn't catch my breath. Basically, that's what you want to be doing. And then, obviously, strength training, and not like this, but you know, you want to be able to stress your muscles, stress your body in a way to build more muscle. So that's what hormesis is a great example. You use exercise to build your muscle. You lift weights, and your body is getting torn and damaged in a way, but your body responds by actually repairing and healing and making you stronger. Saunas are amazing. This show that by looking at Finnish sauna users, if you use it a couple of times a week, you reduce your risk of death by like 24%. If you did it like 4 or 5 times a week, it was like 45%. And that was like, the control was like 1 time a week. There's enough saunas in Finland that everybody can be in a sauna at the same time. So the control group was already doing 1 sauna a week. So saunas activate heat shock proteins. They activate, they activate your innate immune system. They increase your cardiovascular system health. They increase heart rate variability. They help you sweat out toxins. They make you feel good. It's a very powerful tool for longevity. Also, you might maybe know Wim Hof. He's a good friend. He's a crazy man. I once gave a presentation at a big Tony Robbins event, and he came on before me, and he like runs on stage with this big splits, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Okay, so this is a powerful thing. You know, when you're in a cold bath, this is basically a friend who had a very homemade, economically affordable cold plunge. It was basically a trough for animal water, and you pour it full of ice cubes and water, and you jump in. And that actually also activates all these longevity switches in the body. Activates our brown fat and our mitochondria and helps our immune function and helps us increase dopamine and focus and attention. So, I mean, it's basically you need to know the right dose, right? Too much heat, you're going to have heat stroke and die. Too much cold, you're going to hypothermia and die. So it's that right balance. And these therapies you can start to incorporate in your life. There's also hypoxia, another stress. So going to Mount Everest, like the Vilcabamba people in Ecuador live a long time. They live at high altitudes. We actually know that by reducing oxygen, you increase the function of your mitochondria, you clean up old mitochondria, and you repair your tissues. So you can use these hypoxia machines like a cell gym or these masks you can buy for $50 and exercise with them or sit at your desk and like starve yourself oxygen for periods of time. Hyperbaric oxygen, another tool, amazing. This is where you increase pressure in your body. So you're like 2 atmospheres under the ocean, and that at 100% oxygen. And then what that does is that in some really interesting longevity research from Israel, kills all these zombie cells and increases telomere length more than any other therapy. So this might be an increasingly used tool. Ozone therapy, you might have heard about ozone, but that's not just bad because it's from the atmosphere and you inhale it, you're going to die. Well, that's dangerous. Well, yeah, it's dangerous, but if you inhale it, it's dangerous. so is water. If you inhale it, it's very dangerous. It's called drowning. It's where you put it that matters. But this is a hormetic therapy. It's an oxidative therapy. It creates a burst of oxidation in your body. Your body responds by activating stem cells, reducing inflammation, activating your mitochondria, helping to reduce inflammation, and many, many other things. So these are the sort of negative stresses, but there's also abundance, not just adversity, but abundance that can help. And so these compounds we're learning about from plants, like resveratrol, that binds to the sirtuin pathways, one of those 4 longevity switches, and activates our DNA repair, reduces inflammation, and increases, even cardiovascular fitness. Fisetin from strawberries kills those zombie cells we talked about. Pomegranate has something called urolithin A, which is it's a metabolite of your gut microbiome when you consume pomegranate, although many of us don't have the right gut bacteria to do that, so we end up not being able to do it. But you can take this extract of pomegranate called urolithin A, and it turns out it increases your fitness, your strength, and improves mitophagy, which is like the recycling of your mitochondria, and mitochondrial function and fitness, and this is just from a plant food. These are beneficial compounds. So you want to eat a lot of these plant compounds. You want a lot of good fats in your diet. You want to include a lot of spices, really important. Spices are full of these phytochemicals like curcumin. Some of the plant foods are really worth mentioning, like quercetin. You might have heard about this with COVID. It's a great immune modulator. They did a study, I think it was at Mayo, where they gave them quercetin, another drug, and they were able to reverse biological age in these patients. Senolytics are another compound that are really important, which are drugs that are being developed to kill the zombie cells. But there's also a lot of plant compounds like fisetin from strawberries, so important. NAD is something your body makes in the process of creating energy. You can take it as a supplement. You can take it as a subcutaneous injection. You can take an IV. Who here's had an NAD infusion? Anybody? A lot of you, okay. And it's, I had an incredible patient with Parkinson's, and we gave this to her, and her tremor stopped, her movement improved. It was pretty remarkable because it activates the mitochondrial repair systems. And it also activates DNA repair, activates sirtuins. It has just so many benefits. And so it's one of those key, I think, potential longevity tools that we can use that's easy to get. And then there's people talking about metformin, which is a diabetes drug, but I'm not a big fan of that because from the studies I've seen, there are a lot better ways to optimize your insulin signaling pathways than taking a drug to do that. And there's downside effects of this. And in one large study in diabetes, they were trying to prevent diabetes, and they used lifestyle, metformin, or a control group. And the lifestyle group had a 50% reduction in progression of diabetes. The metformin was 31%. But the diet was so bad, it was a high-carb, low-fat diet, which is the worst diet for diabetes. So when you kind of stack metformin against an optimal diet, I don't think it's going to come out very good, but there's a large trial going on called the TAME trial. My mind's open, but I'm not convinced, and I don't recommend it. There's a really cool compound that was found in Rapa Nui. So remember that thing I talked about, mTOR? That is called mammalian target of rapamycin. Rapamycin is named after Rapa Nui, which is where these scientists went in the 60s, and they scraped some stuff off one of these statues, and they said, oh, we're going to find some new drugs, and they thought it was an antifungal, didn't work. They found maybe it modulates the immune system. They use it in transplant medicine, but then some scientists found that it silences mTOR. I mean, it shuts off that pathway that you need to shut off in order to create autophagy. So it's kind of like hacking calorie restriction, and a lot of longevity researchers are now taking this. I'm not recommending my patients yet. I need more data. But it's really an important compound that is available now. That's a prescription. You can get it. It's very inexpensive and may have the potential to really extend life in humans as it does in animals. So what are the things coming down the pike? What are the exciting things? And then I'm going to open up to some questions. This is kind of a kaleidoscopic view of decades of research of scientists, years of research for me, and basically all in my book that's coming out. But it's really an exciting moment because now we're having the ability to do testing to look at these aging biomarkers like DNA methylation, immune age, and other factors. We're looking at functional testing, which isn't just the testing you get when you go to your doctor, but a whole range of other tests that are important to looking at these matrix systems. How do we look at your microbiome, your immune system, your hormones, your detoxification system, your structural system, your transport system? How do we tell what you're made of, and how do we modify those things in order to enhance your health? We can now measure telomere length, which I did it myself a few years ago, and I was 58 when I did it, and my telomeres were 39. So we have the potential to modify our biology all the time. There's this test coming out, it's not out yet, called the IH test. It was from a professor at Stanford I just met with yesterday. David Furman, who created the 1,000 Immunomes Project. The immunome is basically the sum total of all your immune function and genes that regulate it and the immune proteins that form. And he was able to track, looking through AI and incredible, mapping of diseases and people, just huge stuff that we could never do before. These analytes that we now can find to track against inflammation in our bodies that be modified with our lifestyle and other factors that we couldn't test before as a biomarker of aging. So we can look at your immunological clock. Also the biometrics we talked about, the sensors and all the gizmos and gadgets we're wearing to help monitor us in real time are going to feed all this data in and help us figure this out. There's also a whole field of regenerative medicine, which is what does our bodies already use to repair and heal? Like I said, our bodies have this innate immune system, innate intelligence, innate healing and repair mechanisms, and all these longevity switches. How do we naturally activate them? Because our bodies are designed to do that. Like we just get in the way. Like our job is to get out of the way and let our bodies do what they're supposed to do. So we've heard about stem cells coming down the pike, and there's a lot of research coming down the pike on stem cells. Still not ready for prime time, but exciting. Exosome therapy, who's heard of exosomes? Okay, exosomes basically are the little packets of healing factors that are in stem cells. And the stem cells go around. I mean, you know what stem cells are. Basically, you cut yourself. How does it heal? Well, your body has to center on stem cells, release all these healing factors, and make new skin. Right? We experience all that. But exosomes basically takes these out by growing them, taking a placenta, or you can get it from amniotic fluid, growing the stem cells out in the lab, and then you can manufacture huge amounts of these exosomes, and then you can inject them where there's pain. I basically had back surgery 30 years ago, could barely walk, and my back was killing me for decades. And I saw someone who's actually here, Matt Cook, one of my friends and heroes, and he injected my back over the last couple of years, and my back is pretty much out of pain, which is quite amazing after decades. So these things can be really helpful in various chronic illnesses. They can be helpful in repairing broken and damaged joints. And then peptide therapies. You've all heard of peptides, but there's all these peptides. Your body makes thousands and thousands of these peptides. There's over 80 of them that are approved by the FDA. Ozempic for weight loss, you might have heard of as a peptide. Insulin's a peptide. And we're learning now how to use these to modify biological function. So these are our body's messengers. They're how our body communicates and heals. Parabiosis, another cool thing you might have heard about, where you can hook up the circulation of an old mice to young mice. The young mice gives its blood to the old mice, and the old mice become young. But you don't actually have to do that. They did studies where you can do something called plasmapheresis, which is essentially where you filter your blood. You take out the cells, the red cells, white cells, platelets, and you put them back in, and you take out the plasma, which is basically the fluid that your cells float around in. And in the plasmas, all this stuff that kind of accumulates as we age, damaged proteins, inflammatory molecules, all kinds of junk, and cleaning it out actually helps to rejuvenate health and actually reverse some of the biological aging that we see. And these studies have been done in mice, and more is coming on humans. In fact, I had a lot of this done the other day at my friend Matt Cook's house. That's me. That's my plasma. And he basically, I got the works. So the car wash, you get the works. I got the works. I got plasmapheresis. The ozonated the blood when it went in. I had exosomes and peptides and IV vitamins and NAD. I had the whole cocktail. So that's why I'm up here having a good time. And then, of course, there's natural killer cells infusions, which help our immune system work better and kill cancer. And there's also injections, which you can get for broken body parts, which are great. And that's a really important part of healing. If you have, basically, like, need to go to the body shop, we have ways to now repair these damaged joints, tissues, and things that are kind of messed up. And I have a lot of that. And then there's one last thing I'd like to talk about is our minds. Because we can heal our bodies, but we have to heal our minds in order to be healthy. Because our minds, the biggest pharmacy in the world is right between your ears. You don't fix that. If you don't fix your thinking and your mindset and your beliefs, like Jim Quick said, you can do this, but then if you go around, you can do this. Like, that's what he's talking about. And Esther talked about your imagination and the way we need to think about imagining things differently. So we have to heal. And there's exciting moment, and Jai talked about how there's an emerging therapies now that we didn't have before to heal deep trauma. And we're all victims of trauma, whether it's micro trauma or macro trauma, whether it's the trauma of living in the 21st century with all the bad news or the toxins or the stress of our diet, or whether it's the macro trauma of sexual abuse, and whether it's your parents just not loving you well enough. All those things register in our biology. They literally land in our epigenome, and that gets laid down to transmit what happens throughout our life. So the rate of aging is determined by epigenome, and our epigenome is modified by trauma. We know this from the Holocaust survivors. And Esther's, like she was talking about, her parents were in the Holocaust. And we see this, and she talked about having anxiety. Why is that? Because these are things that are hardwired, seemingly hardwired into our nervous system. But we now know through things like psychedelics and other things, we can change this. We can change the structure and the function of our neurons. We can affect our neuroplasticity. So these ancient cultures that Wade talked about have these traditions and bring us all sorts of things. There's modern medicines like ketamine, which also changes the structure and function and neuroplasticity of your brain. Ibogaine, that we see having remarkable effects that, overnight will prevent heroin addicts from having withdrawal and reset their nervous system. So we have this potential moment in history where we can combine a lot of these things to activate our body's innate healing system and have a radical new view of longevity. And this is all the stuff that actually is pretty much available now, depending on your resources and where you are. You can access a lot of this stuff. And there's stuff that's coming down the pike, like the application of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, nanorobots, 3D printing of your organs, gene editing. All this is coming down the road. And the point of all of it is this, right? Have fun. Enjoy your life. Like, what's the point of living to 120? It's not a hedonistic, narcissistic pursuit. It's because as we get older, we gather wisdom and intelligence, and we actually have a more balanced view of life and ourselves and the world. And it's can we start to contribute? I mean, I'm feeling like I'm 20 years old and just starting my life at this point. I'm just trying to reimagine the rest of my life, which could be 60 or 70 or 80 or maybe more years. And so I feel like at this point, I finally figured shit out. And it's like, why should I die now, right? This is a great woman. She had very good genes, okay? Madame Clement, she lived to 122. She was a wine-drinking, smoking chocoholic who made it to 122. So sometimes it's about enjoying life, but sometimes it's about good genes too. Thank you very much. This has been really fun.